Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to tackle a pretty interesting case, a legal head-scratcher, really.
Oh, yeah.
It's the clash between two men who share the same name, Rick Ross. You might know one Rick Ross is the rapper behind hits like Hustlin' and BMF.
Blowing money fast.
Yeah.
Right.
The other, you might say, lived a life that mirrored those lyrics a little too closely.
Yeah.
He was a drug kingpin.
Okay.
And he built a cocaine empire.
Wow.
That stretched across the U.S., moving millions of dollars a day.
So you're saying like one's a rapper and the other's like the real deal?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a really simplified way to put it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. So then what's the problem?
Well, imagine you're this guy. You've built this empire. You've landed in prison.
Right.
And then you discovered there's this rapper out there using your name.
Oh, wow.
And rapping about the very business you were running.
Okay, so wait, hold on. We've got Freeway Ricky Ross,
Yeah.
who's the kingpin.
Right.
And then we have rapper Rick Ross.
Yes.
Okay. And so Freeway is in prison, learns about the rapper,
Yeah.
and is not happy.
Not only that, but the rapper is spinning these tales about drug dealing, painting this larger-than-life persona. It's this collision of reality and artistry
I see what you mean.
that sparked this fascinating legal battle.
So
Yeah.
let's rewind a little bit
Okay.
before we get to the lawsuit.
Sure.
Let's just figure out who these two Rick Rosses really are.
That sounds good.
Right.
Let's start with the original Freeway, Ricky Ross.
Yeah.
His story is one of those classic rises and falls,
Right.
but with a twist.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He rose to the top of the drug world in the 80s,
Okay.
building a network that spans states and amassed a fortune most of us can only dream of.
It's crazy to think about the scale of his operation. Like, we're talking about a guy who's moving millions of dollars
Allegedly.
worth of cocaine daily.
Daily.
And then on top of that,
He even had connections to the Iran-Contra scandal. Like, talk about being in deep.
yeah, really a story for the ages.
So how did he get caught?
Well, his empire came crashing down
Okay.
when he was arrested
Okay.
and sent to prison.
Mm-hmm.
But while behind bars,
Okay.
he did something unexpected.
What's that?
He blew the whistle on police corruption,
Oh, wow.
which ultimately helped free over 100 people who had been wrongly convicted.
So from kingpin to champion for the wrongfully convicted.
It's quite a transformation.
So it was during his time in prison that he first heard about the rapper Rick Ross.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so this rapper, his real name is William Leonard Roberts II,
Right. Okay.
had crafted this image of a drug kingpin, weaving these elaborate, often fictionalized tales of his supposed exploits into his lyrics.
And adding another layer of intrigue to this whole situation, it came out that Roberts had actually worked as a correctional officer.
Yeah. Before his rap career took off. Like, not exactly the background you'd expect from someone building a career on rapping about drug empires. It makes you wonder if he ever crossed paths with any real-life Rick Rosses.
It does.
During his time as a correctional officer, right?
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
when Freeway Ricky Ross heard about this rapper using his name and rapping about his former life, let's just say he wasn't thrilled. He had his lawyer send a cease and desist letter to the rapper. And that's really when the legal battle began.
Okay.
It became a clash of rights.
Okay.
On one side, you have Freeway, Ricky Ross arguing that his name and identity were being used without his permission.
Okay.
And on the other side, you have the rapper, William Leonard Roberts II, claiming that his artistic persona, including the name Rick Ross, was protected under the First Amendment as free speech and artistic expression.
Oh, yeah.
So it was a classic showdown between the right of publicity
the right to control the commercial use of your name and likeness and the right to free speech.
So to understand the rapper's legal argument, we need to dive into this concept of transformative use.
Right.
So think of it like this. You can borrow elements from real life, but you have to twist them, reshape them, turn them into something new and unique.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So the courts had to decide,
Right.
was the rapper simply imitating
Right.
the original Rick Ross?
Okay.
Or was he creating something new, something that stood on its own as art?
So that's the question.
Yeah.
Whether the rapper's persona was transformative
Uh-huh.
or simply an appropriation was at the heart of the lawsuit.
Right.
So the stage was set for a legal battle. That would raise some big questions about the line between inspiration and appropriation,
Uh-huh.
about the relationship between real life and artistic expression,
Mhm.
and ultimately about the very nature of identity in the world of hip-hop.
It's a good one, yeah. Yeah, the court really had its work cut out for it. In this case, they had to weigh the original Rick Ross's right to control his name and likeness against the rapper's right to freedom of artistic expression. It all boiled down to whether the rapper's use of the name Rick Ross was, as you explained earlier, transformative.
And this wasn't just some abstract legal debate, right? There was real money on the line.
Oh, absolutely.
The original Rick Ross was claiming that the rapper, along with his record labels, was profiting off his life story, his identity, without his consent.
Right. He filed a lawsuit alleging violations of California's right of publicity law,
Okay.
which is designed to prevent the unauthorized commercial use of someone's name, voice, or likeness for profit.
So they were saying he was violating their right of publicity.
Exactly, and he didn't stop there.
Really?
He also threw in claims of false advertising, unjust enrichment, and unfair business practices,
Oh, wow.
arguing that the rapper and his labels were essentially building a brand and a fortune off a stolen identity.
So did he win? Did they buy the original Rick Ross's argument that his name and identity were being exploited?
Well, in a decision that sent ripples through the entertainment industry, the court ultimately sided with the rapper. They found that while the rapper's persona drew inspiration from the original Rick Ross's life, it was ultimately transformative enough to be protected by the First Amendment.
So basically the court said, look, the rapper isn't making a documentary about Freeway Ricky Ross's life. He's creating a character, a fictionalized version of a drug kingpin, and that falls under the umbrella of artistic expression.
Exactly. The court recognized that using the name Rick Ross and incorporating some elements of the original Rick Ross's story didn't automatically equate to stealing his identity or profiting solely from his fame. They saw it as a case of an artist drawing inspiration from real life, but ultimately creating something new and distinct.
I know this case has been cited as a landmark decision when it comes to balancing the right of publicity with the First Amendment. Can you break down why it's considered so significant?
Well, this case really clarified the boundaries of transformative use, which, as we discussed, is crucial for protecting artistic freedom. The court made it clear that artists can draw inspiration from real-life events and figures without fear of legal repercussions, as long as they're transforming that source material into something new and unique. This decision gave artists more breathing room to explore real-life narratives without constantly looking over their shoulder for potential lawsuits.
That makes sense, but I imagine this ruling wasn't without its critics. I mean, on the surface, it might seem like the court is giving a pass to someone who built a career off a name associated with criminal activity.
You're right, the decision definitely sparked a lot of debate.
I bet.
Some people felt strongly that the original Rick Ross had been wronged, that the rapper was essentially profiting off a life of crime without any consequences.
Wow.
They argued that this ruling sent the wrong message, that it somehow condoned or even glorified a lifestyle that had caused so much harm.
And on the other side of the coin, you had people celebrating the decision as a victory for artistic freedom.
Precisely, they argued, that if artists were constantly worried about getting sued for drawing inspiration from real life, it would stifle creativity and limit the types of stories they could tell. They saw this case as a crucial win for protecting the freedom to explore complex and controversial themes in art.
So it sounds like this case really forced people to grapple with some thorny questions, like where do we draw the line between inspiration and exploitation? When does using a real person's name or story cross the line into something unethical, even if it's legally protected?
Those are exactly the questions this case raised, and they're questions that go beyond the legal realm and delve into ethics and artistic responsibility. Even though the court sided with the rapper, it didn't erase the ethical complexity surrounding his use of the name Rick Ross.
It makes you think, doesn't it? Even if the law allows it, is it always right for an artist to profit off a name so closely tied to real-life suffering, especially when that suffering was caused by the very activities the artist is rapping about?
And that's where the conversation gets really interesting. The court made a decision based on legal precedent and the First Amendment, but it didn't provide clear-cut answers to these broader ethical questions. It left us with a lot to ponder.
This case really highlights how the legal system doesn't always neatly align with our moral compass. Does it? It's like we have to grapple with these questions on multiple levels. What's legal? What's ethical? What's artistically justifiable? And sometimes those answers aren't so easy to find.
Absolutely. This case left us with more questions than answers, which is often the case with legal battles that touch on these complex issues of identity art and the relationship between reality and fiction.
And this wasn't just some isolated incident, was it? This whole saga really speaks to a larger trend in hip-hop, this blurring of the lines between reality and art, between the persona and the person.
You're right. Hip-hop has always been a genre that draws heavily from real-life experiences, often reflecting the grit and grime of the streets. And many rappers have built their careers on cultivating personas that blend elements of their own lives with fictionalized narratives.
But this case reminds us that those narratives, even when exaggerated or fictionalized, can have real-world consequences. It highlights the potential for exploitation when artists borrow from real lives, especially when those lives involve crime and controversy.
Yeah, it makes you wonder where the responsibility lies, right?
Yeah.
Does the artist have a duty to consider the potential impact of their work, especially when they're profiting off a name so closely associated with real-life harm?
It's a really important question, and it's one that gets to the heart of artistic responsibility. Even if the law gives artists a wide berth when it comes to using real-life elements in their work, there's still this ethical gray area that the law doesn't always address.
And I imagine this ethical gray area gets even murkier when we're talking about a genre like hip-hop, which has always had this complex relationship with reality.
Exactly. Hip-hop is a genre that prides itself on authenticity, on keeping it real,
Right.
but it's also a genre that embraces storytelling exaggeration and the creation of larger-than-life personas.
So where do we draw the line between keeping it real and creating art, especially when those lines start to blur?
It's like asking to solve an unsolvable riddle.
Wow.
How do we balance the need for artistic expression with the responsibility to avoid exploiting or profiting off someone else's pain?
There are no easy answers, that's for sure. But I think this case highlights the importance of engaging with art critically, of being aware of the choices artists make and the potential consequences of those choices. It's not about censoring artists or dictating what they can and can't create, but it's about recognizing that art doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's a product of the real world, and it has the power to shape how we view that world.
So it sounds like we're saying that as consumers of art, we have a role to play too. It's not enough to just passively consume.
Yeah.
We have to actively engage, to question, to consider the context and the implications.
Absolutely. I think it's crucial to ask ourselves questions like, where is this artist drawing their inspiration from? What message are they trying to convey? Are they using their platform responsibly? And ultimately, does this work contribute to a deeper understanding of the world, or does it simply exploit real-life suffering for entertainment value?
So we need to be more mindful, not just as listeners of music, but as consumers of all forms of art. We need to be aware of the stories behind the stories, the real lives that inform the art we consume.
I couldn't agree more, and I think this case serves as a powerful reminder that art can be both entertaining and thought-provoking. It can make us tap our feet and challenge our assumptions all at the same time.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the legal battle of the two Rick Rosses, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the relationship between art and reality is complex and constantly evolving. There's a constant push and pull between the freedom to create and the responsibility to consider the impact of that creation. And navigating this terrain requires a critical eye, an open mind, and a willingness to engage in these tough conversations.
Well said. So to our listeners, we leave you with this. As you explore the world of hip-hop or any other art form, keep asking those tough questions. Don't just accept the narratives presented to you at face value. Dig deeper, consider the context, and use your critical thinking skills to make informed judgments about the art you consume.
And remember, there's always more to uncover, more to learn, and more to discuss. So until next time, keep diving deep.